If you think somehow that they're admitting you, you're totally wrong. There's a game that you have to understand and learn about. There are insider pieces of information that you don't know you need until you need it. That's why it's cool that you have this channel, because these are the things you unfortunately don't learn in high school. And you have to do whatever you can with the hand you were dealt to succeed.
Alright, so what is up, guys? Welcome back to another video with Striving Students. So today we have our PhD student Asim Gazi at Georgia Tech. So we're going to be answering some questions about, just what his high school was like and how that has set him up to apply for school here. And also some things that are unique about this campus. If you're interested about Georgia Tech, the nitty-gritty stuff about it, that's what we're going to be asking. So without further ado, let's get started. So just maybe share your name, what you're studying, just some basic facts about you,
Yeah, sure. My name is Asim Gazi. I'm studying electrical engineering. So I'm doing my PhD in electrical engineering with a minor in biomedical engineering. My thesis work is focused on monitoring, modeling, and modulation. That's how I say the 3 M's. Monitoring, modeling, modulation of stress. So I'm actually taking a look at how something that occurs kind of within the mind manifests itself in the body, and how we can actually pick that up without ever having to ask you a question, are you stressed, right? Pick that up without any sort of user feedback, because it's important towards not only helping people with anxiety disorders, right, trauma disorders, but also just general life, right? Like I always give the example when people ask, like, why is your research important? I say, absolutely, it's important towards people who actually have mental health issues, but I think it's also important when you recognize you have a bad day at work, right? And you're on your way home, right? Or if you're a student, maybe a better example for students, right, is you have a bad day at school, right? You come home and you really don't want to talk. You just had a terrible day. You just want to go to your room, take a nap or play some video games, something, just get your mind off school because you just had a bad day. And you walk in through the door and your mom's like, hey, how was your day at school today? Did you eat? Did you do? And starts asking you a bunch of questions. You don't want that. Wouldn't it have been nice if we could have picked up how you were feeling on your way home and actually like sent a little notification to your mom? Hey, Zucky had a bad day at school. Hey, take it easy on him, right? Those sorts of things. I think ability for technology to interface with the human mind and emotion would substantially advance, I think, society's ability to improve mental health and also improve just our performance when it comes to school and stuff like that. So that's kind of my thesis work. And currently this work is funded by the National Science Foundation. So I'm actually, I'm very fortunate to be a National Science Foundation graduate research fellow. So that's kind of how I do my work, and I'll be funded till 2023. So I have a couple more years to go.
Yeah, so you can just experiment, do whatever you want. And it's a huge honor to be here with you. So just to begin with, we're going to divide into like 2 categories. So first we'll talk about some more high school based stuff, just as when you were applying and stuff like that. And then we'll focus a little bit later on the specifics about Georgia Tech.
Absolutely.
So if you're interested, I'll leave the timestamps down below. But to start off, if you're comfortable, if you can share some of your stats like SAT, scores, ACT, maybe your GPA, college, high school ranks, stuff like that. Some extracurriculars which you did that kind of boosted your, application, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I did my undergrad at the University of Texas at Dallas under a scholarship. So I think what helped to secure that academic excellence scholarship, some of the stats, so to speak, I graduated as the valedictorian of my high school class. So I did graduate at the top of my class. I honestly can't remember at this point what my GPA was, and I can't remember what my SAT or ACT were either. However, what I do remember is they were, believe it or not super like magnificent. So I think one of the aspects that I think coming from, because I'm a second generation American, so to speak, right? Like my parents immigrated to this country, so a lot of times when that happens, if they don't know the game that needs to be played, I was told, hey, just do well in school, right? But you don't understand that, hey, your standardized testing is important. SATs, ACTs, that's important. They're going to evaluate you on that. Your essay is important, right? So how you present yourself in your essay, those sorts of things I didn't really understand at that time. So yeah, I mean, I can't remember my scores, but I don't remember them being like a 36 out of 36 on the ACT. I think it was more like a 33, something 32, 33. So it was above average, but I don't think it was something where it's like, wow, like that person really studied for the ACT. And because, yeah, me and my brothers, we didn't really study as much for the standardized testing. So those are kind of some of the stats. Extracurricular wise, I was volunteering a lot. So I love to give back. I think that's probably one of my favorite things to do in life is volunteering. Even now I volunteer with the Discovery program through Hands On Atlanta. So I teach on Saturday, on every Saturday morning, or every other Saturday morning during the school year. We're actually helping students in Title I schools. So Title I public schools are these schools that are in underfunded sorts of areas. So we volunteer, we organize cool activities, and I really get to know these kids and help mentor them. So similar activities I used to do back in high school. There was the Heart House. So there was Heart House in downtown Dallas that I was very involved with. I was also involved with ICNA Relief. So ICNA Relief is also another organization that does a lot of volunteer work. And I was also involved at my local mosque or masjid. So I did a lot of volunteer work there. And yeah, I think that definitely showed leadership, demonstrated leadership that I could write about in my essay and I could show on my resume that I not only am just a one-track minded person, but I understand that truly to benefit society, you have to have the willingness to give back. And I think that was some of my most favorite things that I did during high school as extracurriculars.
All right. Yeah, that's really awesome. Now, would you like to share some advice that you would like to have given yourself as a high schooler now that you've had a lot of college experience with like several different colleges? So if there's just like one or two pieces of advice that you would like to give yourself if you went back in time.
Yeah, I'll state what I tell my youngest sister who's in high school, right? So my youngest sister, actually, I give her this advice. Number one, I think it's obvious you need to do well in school, right? Like I don't think it requires some some sort of insider information to know, hey, you need to do well in your classes. But what else are these colleges really looking for? I think that's kind of the question that comes to mind. Most people, like when they're reviewing holistically, what are they really looking for? Well, they're looking for something that differentiates you or your background. What you have to remember is, and I think we all need to remember this, not only for success purposes, whatever you define success as, right? I don't like using that word too much, but let's just say academic success, right? It's not just you. It's your upbringing, it's your parents, it's the village that you were raised in, right? So you have to remember that, and I'm gonna make a tiny little tangent and come back. That's also why you can't look down on people that you feel are not academically successful in underfunded or underrepresented minorities, because you have to understand that someone's background really dictates where they go. If I did not have parents that encouraged me to do well in school, I would not be where I am. My mom was always reading. I was reading. My brothers were reading. My sisters were reading, right? So like this sort of thing, having that culture within the household is super important. So these colleges understand that. If you think somehow that they're admitting you, you're totally wrong. They're not admitting you. They're admitting you and your network. They understand, they're trying to make a bet that if I admit this student to my school, this student will have the network to make some substantial contribution to society where we can say, oh, that is a blank student, meaning that is a Georgia Tech student. See, look what our Georgia Tech students do. So they're admitting your network. That's actually why at these top schools, there's a lot of terrible things that occur in admissions, right? Where it's unfortunate, but the majority of people that get into these top schools, it's not because of their intelligence, work ethic. Rarely ever are they most intelligent people in society. Rarely ever are they the hardest working. Oftentimes it's the connections they have. They have a lot of money. They can buy people in the admissions office, right? They can pay people. They can bribe people. I'm sure many of you have seen celebrities do this sort of thing and get caught, right?
And there was that one Netflix show, they made a Netflix thing about some guy who
Yeah.
was doing that at a bunch of elite colleges.
Exactly. So this is real life. Like, unfortunately, this is what happens. And you might ask, like, why would such a prestigious university like Harvard do something like this, right? Like, why would MIT do something like this? Shouldn't they go for that tough young student who grew up in the hood and is really doing well? No, because they understand that it's unfortunate, but that person who comes from money will have the resources then to, even if they were not the top student, get a small loan of $1 million and found a company, right? Like Donald Trump said, right? I got a small loan of $1 million. Imagine if any of us got a small loan of $1 million, right? Like, it's just ridiculous. So we have to understand that component. But at the end of the day, I'm coming back from my tangent. You have to try your best. You were dealt the cards you were dealt. And you have to do whatever you can with the hand you were dealt to succeed, right? You don't have control over everything, but the things that you can control, that I give advice to my youngest sisters with, SAT and ACT, I wish I understood how important standardized testing was, right? Because you could be the top student in a school of 400, 500 graduating class, or 800, 1200, whatever. But how will you be compared to someone from Ohio? You're going to be compared on standardized testing. It's called standardized for a reason. It's standard across the board. So standardized testing is super important. Study for that. You don't have to be a genius. I've tutored students, and this is a true story. I've tutored students who, not to be cocky or anything, but to make a point, I know they were not as good students as me. And I tutored them to get better scores on the SAT and ACT than I did. Because you can actually practice until you get a good score. So SAT and ACT. And then the second thing that I would emphasize, if you're looking to do graduate school in STEM, so this is not med school or law school, right? But this is like a PhD. I would go back to high school, believe it or not. And I see a lot of my peers who come from wealthier families, or come from families that, you know, they're one of my students, one of my lab mates, that's behind kind of the camera view right now, that sits there. Her dad is actually a professor here at Georgia Tech. So he knew the game, right? So he made sure she knew, hey, do something like this. You know, as a high schooler, you can volunteer in a research lab. And imagine how good that looks when you volunteer in research. That's way better than volunteering. It's unfortunate, but it's way better than volunteering at a relief organization or stuff like that. If you volunteer in an academic research lab, the university takes note and says, oh my God, this person knows the game. And they take a bet on that. So that would be the second piece of advice I wish I could give myself now that I am doing my PhD, is early exposure to the research experience through volunteering in a high school in a university research lab as maybe a junior or senior in high school.
All right, that's really awesome advice, especially for all of us high schoolers out there. Now moving on to something more Georgia Tech based. So what other schools were you considering when you applied here, and what ultimately led to make your decision? And I know also, you did your undergrad at UTD, so like maybe you can go back at that time, what other schools you were applying then, why you chose UTD, and then also come for your PhD here.
Yeah. Back from my undergrad, I chose UTD because of the funding situation and for family reasons as well. I was on a full ride scholarship, so it was a good financial decision to stay at UTD. And the reality is, as you know, as we were kind of chatting off camera, right? Like, and I'll share it with your audience. The reality is, no matter what school you go to, the undergrad class you're gonna be learning the same foundational material, right? Like, you're not learning anything new. Like, when you're doing a PhD, now you're learning something new. So you need resources, you need money, you need equipment, sort of thing, right? So a top school can give you that. During your undergrad, the most they can give you is experience. And that is important, right? At top schools, they'll give you experience and connections. But the actual knowledge material, I will compare myself to a lot of my lab mates and the people that I know doing PhDs at Georgia Tech. The fact that I worked hard at UTD and I had a 4.0 GPA at the end of my electrical engineering degree, that really put me above, even though I was at UTD, because at the end of the day, the textbook is the same textbook, right? Everyone gets the same textbook, whether you're at this school, that school, it doesn't matter, right? You might get a better professor, but if you have a hardworking mentality, you will succeed. So I think that was a smart decision on my part, because that kind of helped me work on other things that kind of set me up, like my side business, and stuff like that. I don't think if I was at another school and I was worried about student loans and this, that, and the other, right? Trying to figure out, like, as a Muslim, I can't even do interest, right? So I have to look for interest-free loans. My parents have to help me out, this, that, and the other. I think that would be too much stress to give me the intellectual freedom that helped me kind of found a business in undergrad and stuff like that. So UTD was the smart decision there. Other schools that I was considering, I think I was considering Rice University. I was considering SMU. So I had applied to some of those schools, but the issue with all of those schools is even if I got a full ride coverage on tuition, I would still have to pay for room and board. UTD, I didn't have to do that because I was with my parents. Or I had the luxury of, if I wanted to live with my parents, I could, right? So that was during undergrad. There were a few other schools, but I just can't remember. Again, it's been like 6 years now, I guess, 4 or 5 years. During grad school, I think I still remember who I considered for grad school. I considered MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, Caltech, Georgia Tech, UIUC, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Princeton, these sorts of schools that are Cornell, these sorts of schools that are ranked. So if you look at just like the U.S. News, I think that's U.S. News rankings in electrical engineering, I basically applied to all the top 10. So I got admitted to Georgia Tech and UIUC, and actually I got an interview at Stanford, and it's interesting, and that's why I give the advice I do to my sister, and I'm sharing the advice here. I didn't know the game for the PhD. I'm the first person actually in my extended family to get a PhD in a STEM field. One of my cousins is doing her PhD at Princeton in Near Eastern Studies, but that is a very different sort of PhD process. It's very class oriented. When it comes to research, night and day. I didn't understand that was the game, so I used to ask her for advice, and she said, "Oh, do well in school and get good GRE scores," and I did that. But what the Stanford guy, what the professor told me, he was like, he was interviewing me. He's like, "Man, it looks like you can communicate. It seems like you're a hardworking student, but on your CV, on your curriculum vitae, or vitae, I don't know how to pronounce that, or like your resume kind of thing for academic position, I don't see any sort of substantial research publication, like a conference paper or something like that." And the funny thing is, at that point, I didn't even know you needed that. Right? Because a lot of the professors that I talked to, they were like, "Oh yeah, do well in school." But there's a game that you have to understand and learn about. And I think that's why it's cool that you have this channel, because these are the things you unfortunately don't learn in high school. That there are insider pieces of information that you don't get, you don't know you need until you need it, unfortunately, right? So that's why I encourage high schools that if you want to go into a PhD, get research experience early. So do well in your classes, right? But get research experience. Volunteer as an undergrad, volunteer as a high schooler, volunteer in research labs, because a lot of times you'll get your name on a paper, and that can build up your portfolio. So yeah, I applied to all those schools, and I got the top schools. I got admitted to quite a few after Georgia Tech and UIUC. But the top schools that I got admitted to were Georgia Tech and UIUC. And the motivating factor for Georgia Tech was the Atlanta community. Atlanta is one of the cities with the largest African-American population. And I felt like there was a lot more work that could be done on a societal level here than in the middle of the cornfields of UIUC. So I felt like there was a lot more volunteer work. There's a lot more societal work that I can do, societal change, volunteering, this, that, and the other. In Atlanta, I could help people in poor parts of Atlanta, Title I public schools, instead of in the middle of Champaign, Illinois, where there really is not that city life that unfortunately a lot of people who grow up in suburbs ignore. That there's a lot of poverty in the US. There's a lot of rich people that I don't know why they're not taking care of the poor people, but that's another philosophical conversation. But there's a lot of people that need help. And I think, believe it or not, I did not make my choice to come to Georgia Tech based on academics. I chose Georgia Tech because of the Atlanta population and how I knew Georgia Tech living in the heart of Atlanta. It's in the middle, it's a city campus, right? As kind of y'all saw, right? As y'all came through. It gives you easy access to volunteer opportunity where I don't have to drive 45 minutes to volunteer at a local public school. I can 10 minutes down the road, I can go teach some students.
That's awesome. And it looks like with every question, he's answering like 10 questions. So we're getting a huge value out of this. So if you can, hit that like button to, show your appreciation. But to continue on, you just talked a little bit about, the unique parts of tech. And if there's anything else, what is another thing, maybe because you've already stated, but what is something you would find at Georgia Tech that you wouldn't find anywhere else?
I think living in the heart of Atlanta, you have access to quite a few opportunities, whether that be towards societal change, like giving back, as well as there's good restaurants. Like I can just walk down like 5 minutes and I'm like at a fancy, nice restaurant, right? So that's always something nice. You have easy access to a lot because you're in the middle of the city. So I think that's very unique about Georgia Tech. And then specifically to the electrical engineering department, Georgia Tech has one of, if not the largest electrical engineering department in the country. I think there's like more than 100 faculty members. So what that brings to the table is, again, opportunity. So I think Georgia Tech really differentiates itself there, and the collaborative nature with Emory University. So Emory University is a top medical school. So there's a lot of collaborations there if you work in biomedical engineering that really set your research apart.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And just a few more questions that are not super like academic based, but just, about the vibe and stuff like that. Yeah. So to start off with, what is like student life like, talking about, entertainment options? You were just talking about food and stuff. Is everyone like just super academic, or do they like to have fun? How's the diversity, stuff like that? I know you've touched a bit about on these topics already, but yeah, if you have anything else to add.
I think the diversity is good for a top school. I think all top schools have a problem when it comes to, I think any university has a problem when it comes to diversity. I think we need to do a better job of encouraging underrepresented minorities. We need to do a better job in general when it comes to diversity. That said, Georgia Tech being in Atlanta, I think has facilitated quite a bit. We have heads of departments that are Black women, believe it or not. So that's so awesome. Our president of our university is of Hispanic descent, right? So Georgia Tech is leading, I would say, the front when it comes to diversity. However, we still have a lot of work to do. So that also comes with the student population. I think the population is pretty diverse. It's not as diverse as I would have liked, as any of us would like it to be, but it is diverse. It's very diverse compared to other top institutions. In terms of entertainment and sort of the kind of the vibe, Georgia Tech is known, kind of like Caltech, Georgia Tech, MIT. These sorts of institutes of technology are known for their engineering. So you'll see there's quite a few engineering students. So you'll see a lot of people who are tinkering with stuff, building stuff. There's people who design their own like motorized skateboards, and they fly by you on campus. That's kind of the vibe. I think there's a lot of quirky people, but it's such a diverse community that really you'll fit in whoever you are, right? There's going to be a community for you. Because Georgia Tech has the football teams and this, that, and the other. So there's also the athletics departments and stuff like that. So there's very, very, very diverse. And the fact that it is in the heart of Atlanta, let's say you lived on campus, you have access to quite a bit, like movie theaters, restaurants, you name it. You're in Atlanta, right? You're in, as people sometimes call Hotlanta, right? You're in Hotlanta. So there's access to quite a bit. I think the vibe is really, really cool. Just don't let it interfere with your studies, I guess.
Okay, that's awesome. And just the last question to wrap it up. Maybe this is something that is, it doesn't have to be academic based. Maybe it's something that, just some tech students share, like they know some inside information, but just one advice that you would want to give yourself when you just first started at tech. Maybe it might be some random place that is not safe to go to, or some teacher or something random like that. If you have something just funny story to share about that.
Sure. Parking is a pain. Parking is a real pain because the downside of being in the heart of Atlanta is any city has paid parking, right? So they bill us for parking. Like at UTD, for example, I think my parking pass was like $100, $200, maybe something like that. Maybe they're spiking up the price. I don't know. At Georgia Tech, it's like $800, $900 a year for parking. So it's utterly ridiculous. Yeah, I think that would be the biggest thing. Like I wish I knew that parking would be so expensive. And it's another downside to parking at Georgia Tech is you're only allowed to park in one location. So you buy a parking permit for a specific lot unless it's after hours. So you have to pick where that lot is strategically based on what classes you're taking, where your research lab is, and so on and so forth.
All right, that's gonna wrap up our interview. Thank you so much. It was so awesome to be here with you. So Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
Of course, man.
So you guys, that was an amazing experience for me. I learned a lot. Even though this video was super like on the spot, we just met in the middle of nowhere and we just decided to make that video like a day before. I barely even had any equipment with me, but we tried to do what we could. I hope you guys did enjoy it, and I apologize if the quality was not as good. But if you did enjoy, be sure to hit that like button. And also, if you are interested in college readiness, IB program, and SAT, please be sure to subscribe. Check out the other videos. It'll really help support this channel. And share, if anyone else is interested in seeing this Georgia Tech content, be sure to forward this video to them. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. It's been awesome. Hope to see you guys next time. This video is about to be done. I'm out in 3, 2, 1.